so that I've got a little bit. So I've got a little bit of business management in there. I'm just going to click my got it for the recording. So yeah, each slide basically has a different funding mechanism. Some of you may or may not be familiar with these, and I'm open to questions afterwards. But basically, if you look to OMAFRA, which is our provincial ministry, there's funding available under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. It's a cost share funding. So typically it's 50%, but sometimes it goes up to 70%. And this is for things like advisory services, so conducting assessments and audits or doing plans, training and education, equipment modifications, development of new products, etc. Typically from $1,000 to $30,000, although there are exceptions. And basically it's run through ontarioprogramguides.net. So you go there to that website and you can click on whatever you are, probably producers, but there's also funding available for organizations. And so you click on what's appropriate to you, and it covers, you know, bees, crop sport, livestock, poultry, anything you can think of. So you kind of search for the programs that are available when the application opens, when it closes, and things like that. So that's a really good resource, lots and lots of funding available. And it's not just business management, it's all things, you know, farm expansion, you know, maintenance, things like that. So it's a really great resource. And then the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development. We don't hear so much about this one, but there's something called the Canada-Ontario Job Grant. And so basically employers, and that includes farmers, can get up to $10,000 in government support per person for training. So you could send your employees to different types of programs. It doesn't have to be in class by any means. We have a national farm leadership program, for example, and that's eligible. It's basically to build the capacity of your employees. So that's a really good one there. The website's a bit convoluted, a bunch of letters, but I put it there and I can make this presentation.
No, he missed all the social part, right?
I think someone might not be muted, but that's okay. It happens every meeting.
Margaret May.
So yeah, you can, I can make this presentation afterwards if anyone wants the hyperlink and things like that, no problem. So the next fund I'm going to talk about is specific to Southwestern Ontario. It's called the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund, and it's administered through the Ministry of Economic Development and Innovation. So there's a few caveats here. You have to have, you know, you have to have been in business and have financial statements for at least 3 years, employ at least 5 people, commit to a 30% increase in employment at your workplace or in the community, and then you have to invest some money as well. But there's funding, loans, and grants, so lots of opportunities for support, up to 15% of the total cost, and then there's kind of maximum from 1.5 million on the kind of grants and funding side up to $5 million on the loan side, and you might even be forgiven for 30% of that loan. So that's pretty cool too. And again, this one is not just for farmers as individuals, but for organizations too. So if you are part of a commodity group or part of a general farm organization like OFA, you're eligible for funding from the Ministry of Economic Development and Innovation, which is a very good thing. And then next, this is more of a loan program, but the nice news is it's called the Advanced Payments Program, but some commodity organizations call it the Cash Advance Program or other fancy names. A lot of commodity groups have taken on the administration of this loan program on behalf of the federal government. So for example, I think maybe the Ontario Sheep Federation does it for sheep producers, and I'm sure other producer groups do too. I'm more familiar with the folks in the west of Canada, but you can get up to $400,000 with the first $100,000 interest free. So it's a pretty good deal if you want some, you know, advance money to purchase inputs and kind of help with your cash flow situation. Next, we've got similar, the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act. This is primarily available through lending institutions, so through banks or FCC, and it provides 80% of the financing you might need, up to $500,000 in property, or $350,000 in other eligible assets. New farmers get a higher percentage in financing. Co-ops specifically can access up to $3 million. So if you're part of a co-op or want to be part of a co-op, and it's as long as 10 years and up to 15 years if it's towards land purchase. And again, it's administered by most lending institutions. If you Google it, it'll come up for, TD, CIBC, RBC, BMO, other banks as well. And it's not just for farmers, but it's for organizations too, to access funds for development. And then we also have, I thought I'd throw this in because it's something that we've taken advantage of as an organization. And so both, farm businesses and organizations can apply for youth internships from the Youth Employment Strategy and the Canada Summer Jobs Skills Grant. It has a few other names as well. There's also a Green Jobs Grant. And so basically you can get, each program is a little bit different, but we went under the Youth Employment Strategy and got up to $20,000 towards employing a student or recent grad under the age of 30. So that kind of really helped us as a nonprofit, bring in some really great talent. We ended up hiring this person because he was really awesome. But it kind of gives you that kick to kind of, give young people a chance, but also, not hire someone right away. So farms and organizations can take advantage of these internship programs. And I should mention as well, I know we're talking about funding, but there's also internship programs where you can get, volunteers to support your business or your organization through programs like University of Guelph Student Matching Program. And maybe there's some available from Lambton College as well. I'm not sure, but that would be worth looking into as well to get some support from some more hands on the farm. And then you've got the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. Probably all of you have heard of this group. They basically administer the Growing Your Farm Profits and some of the funding programs available from OMAFRA, but they're also a great resource for learning. And so they offer, so what used to happen was the Growing Your Farm Profits as either a 2-day workshop or there's an online assessment tool available at farmbusinessassessment.com or .ca. Before CAP, you actually had to take this program in order to access any funding from the Ministry of Agriculture. Now it's volunteer, but we do recommend it because it really takes you through all of the areas of managing your farm, from marketing to HR to business strategy. So that kind of makes us quite happy on this side and really gives you a foundation for how are you doing against best practices, and you come away with an action plan to identify, okay, what are the areas I need to work on for my farm, and then going to specific funding programs. As I mentioned in the first slide, under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership administered by OMAFRA, then you can get funding, from, I think I said $1,000 to $30,000 towards advisory services, towards education and training, towards conducting assessments, further assessments in this area to find efficiencies and what you can do to improve your business practices. Something else I wanted to mention is sometimes it's hard to stay in the know about funding opportunities available. I know that local community futures groups and economic development groups usually provide some resources to their local constituents. I subscribe to a newsletter from Mentor Works, and they're kind of a nonprofit group that scans funding opportunities available. So I think almost on a weekly or at least monthly basis, I get, here's new funding updates for Heather. And it kind of shows me what new programs have opened up. And that's kind of the mechanism I use to learn about what's available. But again, that doesn't scan maybe really localized funding available. So I'm sure Shauna's team provides a service as such. And then in terms of filling out, applications for programs and for funding and for loans, there's lots of organizations that assist with that. And then there's lots of, private services that assist with that as well. So if you don't want to spend time, filling in funding applications or loan applications, there are services available to help with that. So I just wanted to make that known as well. And then As I noted, we are a resource center and kind of an umbrella for farm business management, learning opportunities, resources, and tools. So if you haven't checked out our main website, which is our National Farm Business Management Resource Database, you can do so at takeanewaapproach.ca. It's in English and in French if you're so inclined.
What, Scott?
But we show the farm business management resources available, whether it's training and events or tools and resources from starting a farm, growing your farm, and transitioning your farm. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that because it's always nice to know where to go for more information on investing in your farm business training and practices. And I think that about does it for 15 minutes. I see I'm at 9:14. So I'll just finish with a big thank you. And if there's any questions, Shauna, if you want to just go to the next speaker, that's totally cool. If you want to pause for questions, that's totally cool too. But I will stop presenting right now and yeah, leave it to you. So thanks very much, Shauna, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak to you about access to funding and some of the things that I've found in my career and such, and it very much dovetails to the presentation that we just had, because some of the things I was going to touch upon were actually covered there, which was excellent. So but that's great because I won't go over, but you'd rather have two speakers that are saying that's important than not cover it all. So we'll just skip that part of the presentation, but I will go over some of the things that I found about lending and such. So a little bit about me. I am a portfolio manager at BMO Nesbitt Burns, but my career has spanned other things. I did work in foreign exchange trading in Toronto and commercial corporate banking in Toronto and such many years ago. So I do have a kind of a varied experience in financial services. And I'm really going to highlight some of the things that I did when I worked in commercial and corporate banking in Toronto and lending, kind of the bigger picture things that can probably help you with your relationship with any financial institution. And just a little bit about me. I am located in Southwestern Ontario. I do have an undergraduate business degree from Wilfrid Laurier and a master's in business administration from York University. So the first things that I'll go over is whenever you're sitting down with a lender or you're looking for money from a private investor or anything like that, is to know your numbers. And that was highlighted in the last presentation, but to know your numbers and also to look forward. So as an example, every lender knows, particularly, the interest rates have increased from last January to this January. They're going to be asking you, what is your plan? What is your interest rate exposure? What are you going to do? What loans are going to come up? What are your plans? They're just not asking you that just, out of the blue. They're assessing your management talent. They're assessing you as a manager. Are you looking at these things? Do you know about them? Are you aware? That type of stuff. So now it will vary. For example, if you have a $1 million term loan and you've got $15 million of equity, that's a different conversation than if you have a $1 million term loan and $3 million of equity or something like that. So the conversation is going to vary depending on what the interest rate exposure is. But those things are going to come up and you have to have an answer for those types of things. What are you going to do about interest rates? The other question that's probably going to come up kind of tactically is fertilizer prices. Every lender knows that we're having inflation. They see that. We all see that. And fertilizer prices are up substantially year over year. What is your plan? What are you going to do? Have you already forward contracted fertilizer last year? Are you going to mine the soil? What are you going to do? Explaining this to them really shows your management talent. Okay, they're just not asking this just out of the blue, and they're not prying and they're not trying to be annoying. But part of the questions the bank will ask you are to assess your management talent. And the more that you can show there, it really does help your credit file, and it helps your relationship with the bank. So bank or credit union or private lender, I should kind of open that up a little bit broader than just banks. Now, just kind of going on about management talent, I'll give you an example. Okay, when I worked in Toronto, I had a high-tech manufacturer, and it was in the downturn of the 2000s. In early 2000, where we had the tech wreck, and right around year 2000, his revenue for his company fell from $52 million to $9 million. Okay, in about 13 months. Okay. As an example of his management, he made the decision to fire his daughter, who was one of the controllers of the company, on December the 22nd. And he made a point of telling me that, okay? And I can guarantee you, when someone has that type of commitment to the business, that they're going to fire a family member right before Christmas, that is certainly going to go in the credit file and is going to be communicated to credit, because that shows insane dedication to their business and what they're doing and how they're going to make it work. Now, I don't really know how Christmas dinner went that year with those family members and such, but as an example to show, you know, your commitment to the business, it's one of those things in my business career that I'll never forget the conversation and such, because it really did show his incredible commitment to the business and being able to do whatever it takes to make it through this massive downturn when his revenue went from 52 million to 9. So sometimes when banks are asking you these types of things, especially when they're larger loans or when there's a high exposure to certain things, they're trying to assess your management talent and your management talent, you know, being decisive, making decisions, being aware, looking forward. All of those things are so important when it comes down to a lending relationship. Again, it all depends. Again, if we're looking at a $1 million loan and $15 million in equity, it's a much different conversation. But we will have downturns in agriculture. We are seeing higher prices right across the board. We will see lower commodity prices for corn, soybeans, and wheat and other commodities. The ability to show your management talent goes a long way with any financial institution and anybody who's willing to give you money. So some of the things you have to do is show your management talent. They're asking these questions for a reason. Think about what they're going to ask, okay, and have answers for them. You don't have to know everything, but this shows good management thought and good management talent, okay? And that even continues along in what courses are you taking, what boards are you on, what education are you seeking? You know, the one thing about primary production agriculture is a lot of us, we work by ourselves and we work alone and we have our own thoughts and we do things our own ways. Being out there in the community, learning, going to courses, doing things, that does help. It does help your education, and banks and financial institutions do want to know that you're staying current and your knowledge base is up to date and such. So now I'm going to get a little technical here, and I'm going to talk about cost of capital to a financial group. And I'll keep this kind of at a 50,000 foot level, but I hope that I did think that this was important for you to know. So you'll sometimes wonder, why is a financial group or why is a credit union or anybody asking me for financial statements and property statements and searches and lien, all of this type of stuff, okay? Why are they asking me for all of these things? And so I've often heard the comment of, I'm a good client, I repay my bills. You know, and in our world or in the lending world, or when I did work in lending, saying that someone's going to repay their bills is like going to a restaurant and not getting food poisoning and saying it's a good restaurant, okay? It's a general expectation. If you have a loan, you're going to repay your bills and such. And if you go to a restaurant, you're not going to get sick. That's a general expectation and such. So they're asking you for financial statements and all of this information and all of this data because in the world, if a financial group can do a review on a loan, they do not have to put as much capital to support that loan. Okay, and that's really critical to them and to you, because if a financial group does not have to put up as much capital towards it, it means the fees and the interest rates are lower and allows them to make more loans and you to get better rates and better fees. Okay, but that's why they're asking you for it. It's because they have to do an annual review on it. And there's international capital standards. It doesn't matter what bank you're with, credit union with, doesn't matter if it's in Canada, in America, in Britain, it doesn't matter. There's international rules on capital and what banks have to do and financial groups have to do. So they're asking you all of this information so they can get their information, they can write the review, and they can submit it to their credit department so they can keep their cost of capital lower. And it certainly does help when an account manager has to ask multiple times for information or is trying to go over something multiple times and it's difficult to get. That account manager can only have so many accounts that are outstanding. And if they have too many accounts that are past due, they're going to get fired. Okay. Additionally, when someone hasn't given information and such, and then they want more money or looking for new loans, how is that going to go over with the financial group, okay, or with that individual? Because they're already in trouble because they have X number of reviews they have to do and they're behind on them. So it's kind of what I call playing the game. Not that they're working against each other or anything like that, but you've got to know the big picture in terms of why are they asking this? Why, you know, and it doesn't matter if it's $1 million with $15 million equity or 1 million versus $3 million worth of equity. They're asking it because they have to do a review, and every institution does, and they're doing it so they can have a lower capital cost, and it helps you on your fees and your interest rates. If nobody did this, interest rates would be higher, fees would be higher. So that's why they're doing it. So it's a good thing to know in the back of your mind, why is the financial group asking me for all of this information? That's why they have to do reviews, and they all do. So I think that that's important for you to know kind of the big picture. And again, not to put you to sleep with, you know, capital ratios and capital adequacy, but it is a big deal. Just to talk about alternative funding for a minute, there is high interest in farmland. Farmland has had absolutely massive returns over the last decade or 15 years, okay? Whenever there's massive returns in a sector, there will be massive interest in it. So there are private entities that are looking to loans. I've got clients who have had European money come in and buy their farm or help them expand their farm. One thing all of these private lenders or alternative lenders are looking for is great financial management. They want to know your numbers. They want to get reports accurately and quickly, that type of stuff. But there is alternative, you know, non-bank or non-credit union financing and funding available. And they seemingly almost have an unlimited amount of money and are willing to help you and assist with buying other operations and other properties. But your financial management has to be top notch. They want numbers and they want to know it, and they want to know it right away. You know, so but there is alternatives if you're looking to expand or doing things like that. Don't forget, financial groups are in lending to make money, and they are there to help you. They do want to do more business. When I worked in commercial and corporate banking, we were always told, we're going to give you more work than you could possibly handle, and you are going to figure out the best way of doing it, and the people who figure out doing it best are going to get promoted, okay, and the rest of you are going to get fired. So they're going to give you more work than what you can possibly handle, and they're going to give you large targets, and whoever can figure it can get the work done is going to get promoted or is going to keep their job. So they are in the business of making loans. They are there. And if they're not, they're going to tell you, okay? Again, there isn't a financial group that I know of a credit union who isn't interested in agricultural lending, given the capital base and such of what farmland has done. But they are there, you know, to do business, but they do have specific rules that they must follow, like capital adequacy and annual reviews and data that they have to give. And credit is credit, no matter where you're at, whether it's a credit union or a bank, but they are in the business to do loans, that's for sure. If you're new or if you're young or something like that, joint ventures with what I call an old guy is a great opportunity. You have to find that opportunity, but it really does work well. Number one, you get to tell a bank that you're getting management experience with someone who's been around the block a few times. It's a great opportunity to learn. It's a great opportunity to again, to be able to communicate to a bank or a financial group that you are doing this, okay, and you are learning and such. And then when you have a relationship with what I call an old guy, you know, they might be willing to help you out when you have the opportunity to purchase something. The other thing for someone new or not experienced is to off-farm income. You know, it's in Southwestern Ontario, it's just about almost a standard. If you're not in the supply management industry and such, you typically will.
Yeah.
Hold on, Dawn. I think we lost you. I think you maybe went on mute somehow.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, gotta love technology. It's wonderful when it works, and when it doesn't, it's not great. So anyway, I'll just repeat the last thing, whether or not you hoard it or not, just having off-farm income can very much help. A credit application with a bank or credit union, anything, whether it's you, your spouse, whatever, it certainly does help. Some of the last things that two last things that I will say, moving around to different financial institutions. Over the last several years, interest has been like a rounding error. No one's really had to make decisions on it. Farmland returns have been strong. Commodity prices have been strong. You know, nothing goes up forever, and that's probably going to change at some point in time. Having a relationship with your lender is probably going to be more important in the next 10 years than it has been in the last 10 years. You know, we're probably into a multi-year cycle of higher interest rates. We're into probably a multi-year cycle of somewhat higher inflation, okay? Margins are probably going to decline, okay? Your relationship with your lender is probably going to become more and more important, and getting the lowest rate may not be as important as having that relationship with the lender. So I'm not saying we're going back to the early 1980s type of interest rate situation, but You know, I can see interest in being a far higher component of all of our costs, and it's something to think about, and having relationships may be more important than the lowest rate going. Okay, as I have about a minute left, I'll just kind of highlight to you, when you're in any business, you're going to have, in loans with a bank or credit union, you're going to have good account managers, you're going to have not so good account managers. That is the way that it goes. It is what it is. It is not necessarily your relationship with that individual. What it is your relationship with credit department. Every relationship has a credit file, and it doesn't matter who the account manager is. When I worked in that industry, we had 15 to 20 years of credit files. Okay, we go back a long, long time, and the credit department that we've submitted reports to have even a longer memory. So that is your relationship. It doesn't matter if you have a good one. If you don't like them in 2 or 3 years, they'll change. And if you have a good one, you can try to hang on to them forever, but like they will change. But your relationship literally is with credit department. So getting information to an account manager, making their job easier, makes it easier to get to credit. And let me tell you, you'll have a better, happier report that you don't see, but that goes to the credit department. So that is basically what I wanted to go over in about 15 minutes. I wanted to talk about a variety of topics at not a great depth level to try to interest somebody. You know, not all of these points will be interesting to everybody, but hopefully 1 or 2 was, but to try to give you a wide range of topics of kind of my experience in lending when I did it in commercial and corporate banking and such, and then answer any questions that you may have in the question and answer. So thank you very much. It's 9:30, so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Feel free to ask any questions here, or look me up after on email or social media, or however you want to get in contact me, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Much, Don, really appreciate it. And if anybody does need contact information for any of the speakers for any of the sessions today, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with any one of these fantastic people. Just wondering if anyone has any questions for either Heather or Don at this point. And feel free just to unmute and ask them if you do. All right, well, I will start because there's a couple that came to mind for me. I was wondering, and it can be both of you, either of you, what the value of your business plan is when you're seeking funding, and as you said, Don, building that relationship with the credit department, and how beneficial is it to maybe revisit it with your lender or your funder to you know, sort of maybe reevaluate if it's changing.
Do you want to start, Heather?
I was going to ask you to start because I have some other points beyond the financial aspects to make. So go ahead, Don.
Okay. This is my opinion. So, and everybody will have a different opinion on this, but whenever there's a substantial change to the operation, it certainly helps the bank or the credit union or the lending institution to be able to know that you've thought through it and you've got a detailed plan. Does it have to be typed out? Does it have to have headed? Does it have to be like official, like in a binder? No, but I can tell you, whenever there was a major change in an operation, like I was the account manager for Roots, and Roots decided to start an airline in the late 1990s, and let me tell you, their business plan to do that, to get an incredibly competitive industry, was absolutely top notch. Like, especially if you're going to do something a little bit outside of the box, like start an airline in Canada, you would better have a very detailed and very specific plan and something very thought out. And so that's a good example in a tough industry. I've had people, I have had clients who, German money came into Southwestern Ontario and he sold and leased back his land. He had an 8-page, written up analysis of the threats, the opportunities, the weaknesses, the advantages of why I would want to do all that type of stuff. And he presented it, and it certainly made his case far more compelling. So I would say, does it have to be done every year? No. But does it have to be done when there's something very substantial going on? It would certainly help you and the financial institution.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. I don't have the expertise from the lending side, but from what we see, of course, having that business plan and having thought it through is important, but also the process that gets you to there. So the process of, getting together as a team and bringing in sometimes the next generation to talk about, where do we see this farm going? What is everyone's, role within the future of the farm, and kind of, getting on the bus together and figuring out who's going to drive this bus and who's in what position as, as the business marches forward is very, very crucial in terms of the interpersonal relationships and, eventual transition planning. But also, to bring in experts. So if it's farm advisors or tax advisors or financial advisors, to be part of that creation of the future of the farm, what's feasible and also what's desired. So, where are you in your age and stage of farming? Do you have a young family, or, have your kids left the nest, and that means different investment opportunities, different, attitudes towards taking risk and things like that. So, having the business plan is important, but I think, having a process for business planning and like Don says, having a regular mechanism where you're looking at, where are we, where do we want to go, how did that year go, and how does that relate to where we want to go? Do we need to adjust things slightly? Because a business plan isn't necessarily written in stone. You want to have a good enough idea of, that you've thought everything through, but things happen. So you need to have that adaptability, and that's coming from, not only just implementing the plan, but also kind of measuring and tracking where you are and if you need to adjust things along the way. And also, I'll just mention lastly, when we did our study on mental health and farm management, business planning was the one thing that came up that really made a difference in terms of helping farmers sleep at night. So I think it was 88% of those that had a business plan cited it's because it provides peace of mind in a very uncertain and volatile environment. When they've thought about what could happen, what am I going to do about it, and have contingency plans in place, as well as the business plan, that really helps in terms of creating and continuing a positive mental health.
Thank you. Mental health, of course, always very key with all of this. I see Brad Langstaff has a question. Brad, if you'd like to ask that.
Hey guys, I'm not sure this is for directed towards Don or not, but net worth and how often should your bank be updating your net worth? I understand that it can potentially offer you lower interest rates, and it also costs you less fees at the bank. Banks are not as apt to update net worths as quickly as maybe they should be right now, with land values increasing as quickly as they are.
Yep. Okay. Excellent question. Every bank or financial and lending institution, I'll just call it as that, will have a different criteria. And typically, I would say over a 3-year period, they would ask that question, want to know what your net worth is and that type of stuff. In general, that would be kind of a general answer. Every financial institution will have a different criteria in their lending standards in terms of when they will require an updated net worth statement. Typically, every 3 years is kind of an estimate, because it's net worth it doesn't always go up every single year. We've had a good run here, especially last year, but it doesn't mean it's going to go up every single year. But over 3 years, they generally be looking for net worth to increase. Okay, that's a general idea, because we're in a commodity sector. Commodity prices go up, they do go down, but over 3 years, generally they should be looking for net worth to be increasing, and such. But it all depends. Ultimately, the bank, as you said, they look at every loan and every relationship on a basis of its risk. If there's more net worth and less loans against it, that's a less risky bank, less risky loan to the bank, and then therefore it can have a lower rate on it. At the end of the day, credit is credit. And I mean by that, if it's a good loan, it's a good loan, whether you're at a bank or credit union or wherever. And if it's a iffy loan or higher risk loan, it's going to be an iffy loan at every other institution as well. Credit is credit. But certainly anything that has a lower debt to tangible net worth or debt to capital type of a ratio can certainly get a lower interest rate and lower fees, because there is less risk and therefore there's less capital that has to be allocated against that loan. So I know that's not a direct answer, but I tried to answer it so everybody could get some knowledge on it. Certainly every 3 years, if they don't ask for it, you should be giving it to them and just show what your net worth has done.
Wonderful. Anybody else have a question at the moment? Again, you can just take yourself off mute and ask away. One question I know that comes up at the Sarnia-Lambton Economic Partnership is, how is the best way for new farmers, young farmers to find these types of funding? Folks who maybe haven't necessarily grown up in the sector, but have realized in their young life that that's the direction that they want to take their lifestyle and their career.
That's a great question. I see that Don's still on mute, so I think he's waiting for me to answer that one. Tricky Zoom tricks. Yeah, I would say it's fair that just because you're in agriculture doesn't mean you understand all the opportunities available to you. I think we could do a much better job communicating the resources, whether it's, funding, training, etc., available, and the importance of that, kind of ever going or lifelong commitment to improvement and betterment. But yeah, for young farmers or new entrants, I wouldn't necessarily treat them the same. Young farmers, there's lots of young farmers groups. There's the Junior Farmers Association of Ontario. I think there's the Innovative Young Farmers of Ontario too, if I recall correctly. And then for new entrants, there's a lot of different programs. There's a great group out of BC that offer virtual programs and kind of online resources to farmers across Canada called the Young Agrarians, and they offer like a business boot camp, as well as, a toolkit in terms of non-family farm transition, and they have kind of a land matching or farm matching service as well. So if you are a new entrant, you can kind of find those opportunities to get involved in farming. But there's also really good resources from, I'm thinking like the Canadian Ag HR Council, for example. They have some really good career development resources. So if you're thinking of getting into agriculture, it kind of outlines what kind of jobs are available or typical, what your expectations might be in terms of those jobs. So it's a little bit of a loaded question, which I'm sure you know, but they're usually for every question, there's a resource or an abundance of resources out there. But certainly, yeah. And I think Ontario still has, there was, I think it was called CRAFT. There was kind of a program available to specifically to new entrants to kind of, try before you buy, like understand what it is about to get into farming, what's going to be required, and kind of, not bite off more than you can chew at once. So there was some internship and apprenticeship and mentorship opportunities. I haven't heard from them in a while, so I apologize for that. But I'm sure the young farmers groups would be aware of those resources. And maybe I see Joanne Fuller from OFA on, maybe the Lambton Federation of Agriculture or OFA counterparts would be aware of specific new entrant and young farmer programs. But I would say it's about, OMAFRA too is a good resource. They have a beginning farmer business bundle, I think it's called. And it kind of outlines, what you're getting into, what to expect, what are the things you should consider, and of course, some of the funding and resources available to you. There's always a better cost share. There's always more money available to new entrants and young farmers, because we do want to give them a leg up in a, in a pretty challenging business environment.
Okay, I'll just jump on here and such. And yes, the game of Zoom, if you don't want to answer the question, stay on mute and such. It's like not looking at the teacher if you don't want to answer the question in class. But just a couple of things, and actually Heather mentioned them. Some of the commodity advance programs are absolutely amazing, where you can get prime funding at prime rate and be able to put in your crop and then repay it at the end of the year is amazing. And I've been able to tell people in agriculture or in non-agriculture sectors, if you have off-farm income or assistance from something else that can assist your lifestyle and help you make the capital payments on loans and have these commodity advance programs, you have a very strong business case, because basically these programs are very well known, the commodity advance programs, where you get money at prime for the first 100,000, you repay it at the end of the business cycle. And then if you have off-farm income to support yourself, you have a very, very strong business case if you're starting out. So a lot of the programs that are out there, you just have to look for them, hunt for them, but they are excellent. At the end of the day, food production for every country is incredibly important. Okay, we will support food production. The federal government will, the provincial government will. We want food production here. So we just need to look for the programs. But again, you have a very strong business case with these commodity advance programs. And then if you have off-farm income to help your lifestyle and capital purchases, you're off to the races. So you have to look, you have to hunt. But I don't think it's as hard as what you might think. That's my opinion. So.
Always great information. So I'm thinking, since we've talked about the young farmers, what about the other end of the spectrum? When you're potentially looking towards retirement, is there anything in particular you should be thinking towards? Succession planning obviously is our next seminar, but when you're accessing funds, does that look different when you may be looking towards retirement? Say you're not succeeding to a family member. Is there specific things you should be looking at, specific topics you should be bringing up with your financial advisors, all of those kind of pieces?
I was thinking, oh, sorry. I was just going to jump in, Dawn, because I know you're going to cover the financial side of things. And I just wanted to mention there's this, when it comes to transition planning, a lot of it is about, the mentality of the farmer or farmers and next generation. And there's something that we have studied called the succession effect. And basically it means that, as you naturally, get older and age, you tend to become a little bit more, risk averse. You're not willing to kind of take those big leaps and bounds as when you were younger. And so what can happen, quite naturally without really thinking about it, is you start to back off of, risk, but also with risk is opportunity, right? So there might be a land come up for sale, or there might be, I want to get into value add, or I want to, expand the farm in this way. But, mentally you're kind of, whether you it or not, you're kind of winding down a little bit. So that's why it's important to kind of have those conversations ongoing with the next generation, or whoever you're thinking is going to come in after you, because it kind of helps keep that innovation and what next stimulated. So it can kind of work both ways. If you're very conscious of the fact that, I want my farm to continue and to succeed, and I'm going to make investments and purchases and decisions for the longevity of the farm, that's a very, very good thing, but not to forget about the implications for the next generation. So if you're building up all of this, say, debt, for example, figuring out, how is the next generation going to carry that forward? And is that what they want to do? I have an example of a close friend where the parents decided to, basically build an on-farm, agritourism shop. Without really consenting or consulting with the next generation. And the next generation is kind of like, well, we really wish we would be able to be part of this conversation, because the way you've built it really limits its capacity and what we can do with it. Had we made a few adjustments, we could have worked that into our, vision of the farm and transition plan and what we want to do with the farm. So it's important when you're thinking of, longer term investments or the implications of the investments, to really think about who's going to be around to run that and in what way. But then also being mindful that, if you're not actively looking at who you're going to transfer the farm to, you might be unconsciously, making decisions that don't promote growth of the farm so that somebody else has a chance to succeed.
Yeah, that was an excellent answer, and mine's a lot shorter to get to the nuts and bolts. When any lender makes a loan, they want to know how it's going to be repaid, and they know if you're at a certain age category, obviously you're closer to the end of life than the start of life. So, they're going to want to. They don't need to know the nuts and bolts, but they're going to want to know what the repayment plan is in any type of scenario, and that's a nice way of wording when that date of death happens. They want to know that, so they don't need to know the nuts bolts. Typically, don't need to know the nuts and bolts and details, but they want to know how that when that event happens, what's going to happen. Is it inside of a corporation? Is the family going to take over? Is the corporation going to be sold? What's going to go on, and how it is all going to play out? So, and that's a fair question by the financial institution, and they typically do not need to know all the nuts and bolts and details, but they will want to know that, and it's their right to know it, given that they're going to be extending credit to you. So, again, going over that with any financial institution and for you to bring it up is very wise and very forward thinking.
Any other questions from the floor? Otherwise, you keep getting me. So one question I know that as an economic development office, we tend to get is, do funding models change, and is it my responsibility, say as the applicant, the farmer producer, to be going to my financial institution and my funders and keeping track of that? Or would the institutions be proactive in getting to me and letting me know that things are going to be changing or new opportunities are coming up?
That's a good question. And that's a tough answer, and the reason why it's a tough answer is it depends on the institution you're dealing with. And specifically, if we're talking about a small credit union in a small geographic area, if you think in the West right now, there's some credit unions that are struggling because there was drought and there's financial distress, and that's a big impact. So they've really changed their lending criteria and what they're doing, and their outlook and how they're doing things. If you're dealing with a major national bank, it might be in an area where they want to reduce their exposure to, because they have overexposure to the dairy industry, supply management, or whatever. So, and you're not going to know that, and usually the account manager won't know that it'll be a decision made in a head office. So it's a tough one to answer. The way I would look at it, the best way I would answer it is to keep the lines of communication with the financial institution open and try to get a read on what's going on, because it's rare that you would over communicate with a financial institution. It can happen, but it's usually the other way. So being able to ask them what's going on, how does the bank or how does the credit union look at this, how are things going, you'll be able to get a read from that account manager, that individual that you're dealing with. But it's very hard to give a general answer to that, given that lending institutions are so different, and you don't know what, for example, the Bank of Nova Scotia's loan portfolio is and what interest they have or where they're going, or any other institution. But they can change and strategically say, I want to have more exposure here, or I want to have less exposure here because I have overexposure. So the best way of handling it is to keep the lines of communication open, because it's very rare when someone over communicates, it's generally that they're under communicating. So that's how I would handle that situation.
Yeah, no, really, really good points, Don. And I think, in my experience, funding bodies aren't very forthcoming when it comes to, really significant changes in applications and things like that, which can be a little bit frustrating. So you have to be, paying attention to, okay, are there changes from the last time I did this? Typically you can kind of copy and paste some of your things that sometimes, it just changes. And so you have to wait until those things are announced. But again, I think, as Don said, building some relationships on that side, and even on the funding side, when I've built some relationships with even some of our program handlers at different funding bodies, they'll give us a little heads up and say, hey, get your ducks in a row because we're going to be announcing this funding coming up. So that's a huge heads up, because a lot of times you kind of wait until the funding is announced or you hear about it from someone else, and then you're kind of chasing your tail trying to get your application in on time. So again, establishing those relationships, they can happen on kind of the funding side as well. You know, whether it's through a service body, like I think ACC Farmers Financial helps some producers, not to name them specifically, but I'm not super aware of the Ontario groups, but there are groups that including commodity organizations that help their producers, you know, apply for and secure funding. And so having a good relationship with those folks who can kind of be on the lookout, because it can take a lot of time, believe me, a lot of time away of what you wish you were working on to, you know, scan for funding available and fill out the applications. But there's always someone out there that's willing and able to help. And sometimes it's worth, you know, paying a bit of a service fee for someone who's going to worry about, you know, having all your ducks in a row for a funding opportunity. So yeah, I would look for support in that area and talk to my commodity association and see if they do it, or if they know folks that do it, and kind of build those relations so you get the heads up and you can take advantage of opportunities. I know all the provinces are a little bit different. Some have kind of rolling open applications and others have specific dates and kind of timelines. I think in Ontario, it's more, you know, you can apply between this time and funding opens up at certain times during the year. So that makes it a little bit more tricky, because you might not be thinking of what you want to do in January, in June, but that's just how it is. And having someone to kind of keep their eye on that is important.
Thank you so much. Great information. I hope all of our attendees have found it of value for their time. I know I certainly have learned a lot, as I always do, and we're connected with such knowledgeable people in the industry. So really thank Heather and Don for their time. Much appreciated, as always. Very supportive of Lambton County, and we definitely appreciate that. There are different pieces that folks are putting in the comments, and I will make sure that we send that out to attendees as well. And these are being recorded, of course, so that they can be reviewed at another time, very possibly through the SLEP website. So we'll get that information out to everyone as well.